I was almost evacuated. You know,
Yeah?
my son is British,
Yes,
and I
of
had
course.
to make the decision whether or not to stay or to go. I'm glad I stayed.
Yeah.
But since you brought it up, tell me about that period. Tell me about, because there are a lot of UK citizens in Kenya.
Yeah.
What was that like, coordinating? Should I stay? Should I go? And if we're going, we got to go now.
Yeah. Well, with hindsight, it was utterly mad that anybody wanted to leave. And indeed, all the people who stayed in Kenya
Are the smartest.
Are the smartest and had the best time. But like, we didn't know that at the time. You know,
Yes.
the information we'd had was, you know, our television screens, certainly in the UK, were full of people in Italy, people dying in hospital corridors, the assumption that, you know, pregnant women and children would be the most affected by this virus. So with all the information now, you wouldn't even have a conversation about evacuating people.
Yes.
But the information that we had then, you know, we have a duty of care and a responsibility to our staff, and we thought hospitals in all countries would be overwhelmed. But I think, and you've been talking a bit about career challenges. One of the hardest moments for me was red listing. So obviously Kenya closed the airspace for a bit, but then about a year later, as these new variants started coming out, the UK put Kenya on a red list, which limited the ability to get between the two countries. And for me, that was a really tough career time, because I'd said to London, look, if you're going to do this, two things. One, you need to share the medical data in advance, so the Kenyan authorities know why we're doing this. And secondly, we're coming up to Easter. Don't do it at Easter.
Yes.
So, of course, what happened is it was announced on Good Friday and we hadn't shared any medical data in advance. And the Kenyan government was understandably absolutely furious. And I remember sitting on Easter Saturday by myself. It was a 7 p.m. curfew. I'd been working all day on this stuff. I remember just sitting down thinking, do you know what? I'm okay if the government of Kenya is mad at me, because I would be mad at me if I were them.
Yes.
But I really struggle when it's your own side, as it were, who hasn't given you the information to do your job properly.
Yes.
And those are the moments I actually find the most challenging. So, you know, whatever the government of Kenya wants to say, absolutely fine. My job is to take it. But when your own side doesn't give you the tools,
Yes.
That's the bit that I find both emotionally and intellectually challenging.
Your former deputy, Susie Kitchens,
Yes.
wonderful
Love
lady.
Susie.
Yeah, great friend.
I love my current deputies too.
Yeah, Josephine, we love you too. We love them all. But Susie was wonderful. One thing she told me about the COVID period is that there was very little to none life-work balance,
Yeah.
because London was on all the time and they expected you to be on all the time.
Yeah.
And with everything happening and the last minute changes for everything, with regards to exactly that life-work balance and the hours that you had to put in, tell me about that 2020 March into 2021.
Yeah. So it was tough. It was, you know, flat out working with the emotional demands as well as the sort of physical demands, doing everything online, you know, this new
Yes.
hybrid way of working.
You shut the High Commission?
We shut the High Commission down because we just didn't know how this thing was spreading.
Yes.
But then after sort of 2 or 3 months, I mean, one, I was in an incredibly fortunate position because, you know, I've got a nice house with a garden. The number of my friends in London who are in, you know, flat shares where they've just got their room, you know, the challenges that people faced here were horrendous. So I'm certainly not getting out a violin and expecting any sympathy.
Yes.
But in terms of that balance, actually I had a good sort of a little social bubble. So we'd spend our sort of evenings and weekends together where we could and where curfew allowed. And that was kind of a really good release.
Josephine did tell me in camera, but I'm going to release it now, that you actually opened up your residence.
Yes.
That's one of the nicest. She told me, you know what? Her Excellency actually opened up her residence and her garden and her space, you know, to the staff because, you know, for those who are having more of a challenging time. What made you do that?
Just I'd got so much. And it seemed obvious to share it. So, you know, we got spaces where people could meet outdoors. We could give them a cup of tea and a coffee with minimal COVID risk. You know, teams could get together. So I just think there's something about meeting in person. And I slightly worry with the way we're going with the world on sort of social media. And, you know, yes, you can spend your entire morning on WhatsApp talking to your friends. But it's not the same as sitting down with a cup of tea or going for a drink or going for dinner. And that human touch matters so much to all of our mental health and well-being. And so I didn't actually think about it. I just sort of instinctively went, my house is open, come round, have a cup of tea.